Welcome to The Problem, a Lockwood & Co. podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
And today we are talking about the last part of part 2, the Ealing Cannibal. I always want to say the Ewing, even though it's an A after that E, not a U.
The Ewing?
Ewing, I don't know.
I don't know either.
It just looks like it should say EULING. My brain doesn't make sense, okay? But every single time I have said Ealing Cannibal, my first thought has been Ealing Cannibal.
If I had just read it, I would be like, oh, this is like some made up fantasy stuff. Names in London to me are like Tolkien-esque, fantasy places that make no sense because I'm from America. And like everything is named after either Native American stuff or French stuff.
Right. There's nothing in America named after England stuff.
No, like we made up York and we were like, it's New York.
It's even. New York, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But this really is in Ealing.
Yes, it's the Ealing Cannibal. I really like these chapters. Though I will say, a part of me has always thought that, and I mean this as no slight to my favorite character, but I feel like Lucy doesn't actually do much here. Yeah.
No, especially at the end, she's like not clutch to catching the thing.
Like, I guess she does say that that's where the source is and everything, but I don't know, it feels like she wasn't really needed. I feel like the big strokes here, they could have done this job without a listener.
Yeah, we talked about it last time a little bit where I was like, they could, in the show version, this could just not happen. Like, that's what I feel like would happen. This just wouldn't be here. But rereading it this time, I was like, oh, I see. I think there's a little bit of like foreshadowing happening for when we're going to get to the end.
Yeah, there's a lot of good character stuff happening in here and that sort of thing. But I just mean the conceit behind them needing Lucy. I feel like it doesn't really pay off.
Yeah, that's why I was confused about what Fitz is doing. Like, why does she need Lucy at this? What is it a test of? What did she want the outcome to be?
Like, if anything, to me, this job should not have a listener.
And they would be able to do it better, yeah.
Because they're the ones getting attacked by the ghost the most. But then at the end, Lucy wasn't really needed. I don't know. Like, other than, again, like, she is the one who said the source was there, but it was Skull who told her that they were on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't Lucy's listening. Well, I mean, like, Lucy's listening lets her talk to Skull, but like Fitz doesn't know about Skull, so when you put it all together, it makes little sense. But it's a good scene.
I think there are ideas here that are kind of new to this book and are relevant to how the creeping shadow operates later.
Yeah, well, there's the whole stuff with the Routwell doohickey.
Yeah, that too. I wasn't thinking that specifically, but yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. Chapter 8, in which Quill Kipps joins Lucy and Lockwood & Co., and then they all begin inspecting the haunted house. And our chapter art is the inside of the house.
Creepy staircase. There's nothing creepy. I don't know. It's not creepy.
It isn't, other than the general style of the picture with everything sort of disappearing into darkness.
Yeah.
But that's just how all of them are.
It does show the creepy wall stuff where there's like these squares that he talks about that are painted all over.
Oh, you're right. Just glancing at the picture, I just assumed those were like hung pictures, like picture frames.
Yeah, that's what I thought at first too.
But no, you're right. I forgot. Interesting. That is so weird now that I see it represented. Like, why? Anyways, we start with them sort of arriving at the house later than they would have liked because of rush hour traffic and everybody wanting to get home before curfew.
Yeah, it talks about like when they pull up to the place, you like expect it to look like a haunted house, but it doesn't have the look. It's just another house. And then they come on Quill Kipps.
And again, they're all like shocked. I feel like if I worked at Lockwood & Co. and I pulled up to a Fitz provided job and Quill stepped out, I'd be like, yeah.
Again, what is Penelope doing? Is this a punishment to Quill? Is this like, I don't understand. I can't figure out what her plan is. She's like, I need Lucy to do this, I guess, as a test to see how sensitive of a listener she is. And maybe Quill can report back, but why does it have to be him, given the history between him and Lockwood and Co.?
Like, maybe after the last poltergeist job, she thinks that Lucy will trust Quill.
Okay.
And he'll be able to find some stuff out about Lucy, and that and presumably she still thinks he's her. Well, he said he's getting punished for being independent, so I don't know if she would still think that Quill is like a lapdog.
I like that Quill interprets being assigned to Lockwood and Co. as punishment. Like, that's funny and good. I'm not sure that Penelope means it that way, and so it's just difficult for me to read why this person in particular. I mean, like, it's obvious when you step out of the story why it's Quill, because like, we love Quill, and
well, I don't think I did at this point, but yeah. Story-wise, it wouldn't make sense to introduce a new character.
Right. So it's another one of those things where I'm just not sure what she intends. It's very difficult for me to understand what she's doing in the story, and I don't think it ever really becomes clear.
I don't think so either.
It's fine. Antagonists don't really have to make sense. They just have to, like, constantly cause problems for the protagonist. That's fine.
Penelope ends up mattering not at all in this book.
Until, like, the very
end. Yeah. And that's like a setup for book 5.
Yeah. When we meet Quill, there is the funny thing here where it says his freckled face was twisted in an expression of sour disapproval, but we'd had enough experience with Quill Kipps to know that meant little.
Yeah.
He might possibly have been in a good mood, which, like, reminded me also of the haunted house that he just talked about, where, like, it looks normal on the outside, but there could be all kinds of terrible trauma on the inside, just like with people. And
I like the idea that Quill has resting sour face, which is the most, like, British thing I've ever said. Like, I feel like at one point almost all English boys between, like, 7 and 11 have resting sour face. Oh, I also really love throughout all of this, George is like, whenever somebody brings up a room, George will say what body part was found in that room.
Yeah.
He sounds so, like, nonchalant about it, and then when he makes his confession later to Lucy that he like super doesn't want to see this ghost, you sort of look back on it like, oh, he's scared out of his mind and he's deflecting. Yeah.
He's like info dump. He's like, I did research, and, like, here's all the facts so I can just think about research.
It's great.
I think it says something like he's a macabre realtor or something like that. Like,
that's great. Can you imagine going to look at a house, and here is where the previous owner put some eyeballs of his neighbor that he ate.
We call this the foot room.
Yeah. If the house was a good price, who am I to complain?
When they talk to Quill, I don't know, he seems like he's feeling really sorry for himself. He says, I'll not be much use, since psychically speaking, I'm practically deaf and blind. The most warning I get of something coming nowadays is sort of squeezing sensation in my stomach. And as often as not, that's gas. So I guess this also lets the new reader know, like, if this, your aunt and uncle bought you this book for Christmas or something, and it's out of context, that Quill has no psychic powers a funny way.
It's also just a really great message to young people that getting out of being a kid, like entering your 20s, it's not a great time.
Right, yeah.
You do just kind of feel a little lost. Not that I ever would have gone back. No,
oh,
sir.
No. Yeah.
But when you think to yourself, oh, everything will make sense when I'm 22 or whatever. Like, no, friend.
No.
Good luck ever finding that feeling.
Yeah, he just feels sorry for himself. I guess this, because this is the first Kipps that we get in the book, this is an important place for his arc in the book to start too.
Yes.
Where he's just like, I'm worthless because I don't have powers.
And also, Lockwood is so nice to him here. I just get the feeling that some of that is the way that Kipps volunteered to work with them on the poltergeist case, definitely.
Yeah.
But I do also think some of that is Lockwood trying to reform himself here.
It's also not present in Lucy's narrative voice to be like, you know, Quill Kipps looked like he had fallen down
Right,
you know,
yeah.
a set of stairs or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, she's usually pretty mean when she describes Quill, and there's not really any of that.
But her saying, oh, that he has the sour face, but that's just kind of how he always looked. So that's actually really nice for Lucy.
For Lucy,
about Kipps. And really, George is a little bit mean to him, but not anything like he used to be. So you definitely feel how different it is now.
He's also here by himself. He doesn't have his crew, so that does feel like punishment.
Yeah. I don't think we ever see them again.
I don't think so either.
We get a little bit of Lucy talking to Skull, and we find out that Skull is basically acting like a 7-year-old when you choose to play with a different kid instead of them. I
hate you now. Yeah. So I am always trying to read Skull as like the symbolic inner voice.
Right.
And so I was like, what does this mean as that? Because this seems like an inter-character problem. You know, like Skull is hurt with Lucy, but like, and so I can understand that on a character level. But does it mean anything? Like, is she ashamed on some level that she's like pushing down out of her consciousness to be working with Lockwood and Co. again? Like, oh, I meant to stay away, but I just can't. I can't keep my word to myself, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you could kind of read it that way. And then with the Skull not really helping, it's kind of like only 50% of Lucy is helping.
Yeah.
Sometimes even I forget that her main reason for leaving wasn't to protect them from her abilities, but because she thinks Lockwood will make bad decisions around her. And so I keep forgetting that, like, she's not actually worried about her abilities.
No, she's like proud of them, right?
Yeah.
She's like, I've really got it under control now.
After Skull is useless, although he does kind of have this ooh moment with when Lucy first walks them into the house. He refuses to give any information because he is butthurt.
Yeah.
We get a description of the house. It's very small. And I guess that's kind of important just because the dude, the cannibal, was described as so very large. I do kind of enjoy that image of this really huge guy in this tiny house, and how we see over the next few chapters how he kind of became the house.
Yeah, but the inside of the place is very badly decorated with yellows and browns and these weird squares painted on the walls everywhere. Everything's kind of drab. And it's also completely empty because it's been gutted after the crimes and nobody's been here for 30 years.
So they get everything set up. They do some looking around. And we have a couple moments where things are obviously different and awkward. Lucy and Kipps are in a room alone together and she thinks she hears something. But obviously Kipps didn't.
Yeah, Kipps is like, nah, I don't hear anything. And then he just wants to like pick at her to like, oh, I see you came crawling back to Lockwood and Co. And she's like, I am not back.
I do love when she says, I'm just helping out for today. And he says, and the difference is, and then George walks in and says, she's getting paid more. Anyways, so then they all group up again to have a talk about their first thoughts. And this brings us to an interesting conversation about Kipps, where Lockwood brings up that, you know, he got a promotion after Acmere's, and like we're saying, Kipps thinks him working here is a punishment. And Kipps says, they had to give me that because it was such a public success. But they don't trust me now. I showed a little too much independence.
There's no reward for working outside the Fitz manual, right?
Yeah. Even if publicly you get rewarded.
Probably more so, right? You like had the audacity to get into the papers. And so like, I can't even punish you the right way. Feels like what happened to Holly.
I like this idea that Lockwood is just sort of slowly, like Pokemon, catching all these not burned out, but agents
Like,
who've had their eyes
thrown
open
away.
to everything. Yeah.
That's why Lockwood and Co. is dangerous to the whole system. Because, like, you can throw these people away. They won't be a threat. But then, like, now that he's assembling them, it becomes a real problem by the end of this book.
They've done their first tour. Stirrings, but nothing clear. It's not quite dark yet, though. I think Lucy does mention the sort of sounds that she heard. But, again, everyone's just like, yeah, it sounds like a ghost. Oh, George has this great bit where he is, again, he says, the coldest places are the basement, particularly one spot near the bottom of the stairs, and the kitchen. Again, that's what you'd expect. Those rooms are where forensics found most of the blood stains, plus a few tasty scraps. Our friend Guffey didn't get around to sampling. And Holly's just like, don't. And I just wrote down that he is really on tonight. Just like body part here, body part there, all the body parts.
I think it's what you said, that he's really trying to, like, stay in his head to not be here.
I didn't even pick up on that. Like, I didn't make that connection until I got to him telling Lucy that he didn't want to see the ghost. Even though, like, I've read this before, you know, I already knew that conversation happened. So it's really well done. And then this is where they also talk about him being too big for the hallways. And that there's, like, handprints, greasy handprints on doors and stuff.
Mm-hmm. He's like a gluttonous monster, like a ogre or something.
Yeah, he does kind of seem like he was inhuman before he died.
Yeah.
And I'm not generally a big fan of people looking like the evil that they are. Or you know what I mean? Like, I think that's kind of lazy. But it is all about making this house as scary as possible, so I see what he's doing.
I think it's like I said before, that the cannibal trope is usually like a gigantic person with the strength of many, you know, victims.
Yeah. But he only had the one victim.
I don't know. I think once we see the source, there could be an implication there was more than one.
That could have been that one dude's teeth.
Yeah, I guess.
Because we didn't hear from George about where the teeth were found.
Yeah, because that would make me think that, like, that would have been mentioned at some point. Of, like, they've found parts of him all over the house, but never into the teeth. Yeah. No,
I agree. It's just weird because we never hear about any other victims or anything.
Yeah.
But maybe he was eating other people.
It's weird that I hope so. I don't know why that makes any sense. Yeah, I don't have a ton of notes because it's like...
No, I don't either. They're all just investigating. Eventually, Lucy does hear some more, like, significant sounds.
She hears, like, a click, click, click.
Yeah, and she can't quite figure out what that is. It's just really creepy. Like, dark house, creepy noises, things moving that shouldn't be moving. And then she realizes at one point when she's with George, kind of outside of the kitchen looking in, that she can hear that something's blocking the lights that they set up in there. Yeah. So she can't see the lights in there, and there's a chopping noise, as though somebody is using a knife on a wooden surface.
Yeah, it says the panes to the kitchen were, like, completely black. And she hears, like, somebody whistling while they work, kind of a thing.
Yes, the whistle, yeah.
And she locates everyone else in the house and realizes that there's, like, an extra person, so to speak, in the kitchen. And is basically the end of the chapter, I guess.
Yes, it
Someone was in the kitchen.
Yeah, I just wrote down fucking creepy.
I literally put creepy. That was my note. So there you go. Yeah, so then we go to chapter 9, where Lucy experiences echoes of the cannibal while Skull petulantly refuses to help.
I just thought, reading that, it could mean that Lucy feels, like, petulant about helping Lockwood.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. If on some level she's like, oh, I can't believe I gave in.
Especially since she knows that it was, or she thinks she knows that it was Penelope who asked for her to be there.
Yeah, it's like she was tricked into giving in on some level, you know, like that makes it worse somehow for her.
Tricked into giving in, but also, you know, she thought that Lockwood really wanted to work with her again, and then she found out that maybe that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Anyways, the chapter art is human stew. There's no two ways around that. There's a pot on a stove with steam or smoke or whatever coming out of it. Human stew.
Is this a electric stove?
From the little I can see, it's got like little like bars or whatever you would call them. I can't think of the word grate. Maybe coming out of the circle. So that says gas to me.
Oh, yeah, I see it a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like it's sitting up on them.
I think it makes it creepier if it's gas somehow. I don't know why.
The clicking sound that gas stoves make can be very creepy.
Yeah.
And also the idea that a ghost could turn on like gas filling the room.
That's terrible.
Creepy. And that like hissing sound that gas escaping when it's not being burned makes. Yeah. We just like, yeah, they're all looking in at the kitchen, and I think eventually they go in and nothing's there.
Yeah, as soon as they go inside, the whole whistling stops, the sound stops.
She can still hear the chopping.
Yeah, and she can see through the windows now, so it's like the thing like went away.
But Lockwood and everyone agreed that they couldn't see through the lights through the glass doors, so it was not just in Lucy's head. And this is sort of where I think Lockwood decides that like it's just tricking them. It's playing tricks on them. And
it's about like 9:00 at night. So they know that like midnight's going to be like the real time that something's probably going to happen. Lockwood basically says, we're going to meet up at 11:30 and, try to find clues to where the source is. Mm-hmm. Some of them are in stationary areas, and then there'll be somebody bouncing around between everybody to check and make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen them set up like this before at other jobs.
And this is where George brings out the contraption that you were talking about earlier.
Yes, which is a psychic early warning system, Pews.
This whole thing is super interesting to me. I like this kind of thing a lot in fantasy books. So this is like a clever evolution of the world building. There's like these little zinc wires, but then they have spider silk coated on them. And because spiders and spider silk respond to ghosts, there'll be like some kind of tension or differential in the wires when a ghost is nearby, and that will like ring a bell. So that's the idea. So that's a pretty clever application of the world building rules to like an engineering problem. Mm-hmm. And I also like that this thing kind of fits in with other things that we heard about in the first book from Fairfax, where they're selling like little trinkets for kids to wear to like keep them quote unquote safe from ghosts, but they're pretty useless. And like these things are pretty useless too. So I like that there's just like a money making, not like a toy, but like, I don't know. Scheme. Yeah, just like is junk.
Yeah, the evil capitalism in the background of everything.
Yeah.
You see it running the show.
But you can see how you would think, well, maybe it would work, based on like all the rules that you know.
And it does ring. It's just not an early warning system.
No, not an early.
It's got to be like neck deep in ghost.
Yeah.
Which is how George explains it. It's supposed to ring before the ghost appears. Lucy asks if it works, and he says, this is the first time we're testing it out.
This has become his little thing since Lucy left.
And then Lucy and George have a bit of a spat, where Lucy tells George that she's very happy to be working with him again, and he's like, oh, are you? That surprises me. And then he sort of says, well, what about Holly? And Lucy's like, I'm sick of people blaming Holly. I didn't leave because of Holly.
It makes me wonder if Stroud got letters that were like, I can't believe Holly made her leave. And he's like, I got to make it clear in the next book that that's not what happened.
So, but George just keeps mentioning about how, she and Holly don't get along. And then she's like, we sorted it out. And then George is like, the poltergeist was you sorting things out and all these things. And then he says you left because you got so mad at her. And I just love that he's bringing that up. Mm-hmm. That like Holly and Lucy arguing was what caused the poltergeist to go crazy, while George and Lucy are arguing in a haunted house.
Right, yeah.
Like maybe...
Don't you know that arguing in a haunted house is dangerous?
Yeah. Maybe the two... I mean, they do kind of end the argument pretty quickly, but still, like...
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's pretty funny. It's just crazy to think that her and George never, like, went out for a coffee or anything in that time. Like, they'd never talked. Yeah. That's so sad.
It makes sense that George is pissed.
Yeah. It's so important to Lucy here to be understood. to be like, no, understand the reasons why I left.
But she's not giving them the real reason.
Yes, exactly. So I really like that. She's like, why don't you understand? And then she's not telling him the whole story either.
Yeah, it's great. All of their arguments in these chapters are good and are very sibling. Anyways, and then as he was sort of being angry at her, she holds up her hand for silence. And there's some more stomping upstairs that causes the light to swing, which George saw the light swing but didn't hear the stomping.
Mm-hmm.
But they go upstairs to investigate. There's like an intense cold spot that hurts George, which is interesting.
It's like the ghost went through him or something. That's how I interpret that.
But that would kill him.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I feel like this thing's almost like a poltergeist, but I guess it's not, because later on, Lockwood fights it, so that can't work. Yeah, I don't know what that is then.
It does kind of seem like in the middle of it, halfway to being a poltergeist. I don't know if that's something that happens, but...
Yeah, it's another weird ghost. It's just whatever it needs to be for the story, which is fine. But yeah, George is like, this thing is playing tricks. Lockwood was right.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, what does the skull say? That thing is never short of opinions. And she's like, oh, it's in a grump. I can't believe that I'm working with Lockwood and Co. again. And George says, oh, it's jealous, acting like a jilted lover.
Mm-hmm.
So like, this is what I brought up before about like, are we supposed to ship Skull to Lucy? Is he in love with her?
I mean, I don't know if we're supposed to support that. I've said before, I certainly think Skull thinks he is.
But then you were like backhandedly mean to Lucy because you were like, well, what choice does he have? She's the only option. So.
I did not mean that as a slight against Lucy. I just meant Skull has one choice for someone he can talk to. Yeah. Technically, I suppose he has two choices, but he doesn't know about that second choice currently. And that second choice is spoken for ghost-wise.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think Skull can see that if she does go back to Lockwood and Co., there'd be a lot less conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not a weird romantic thing, it still would make him lonelier. Which is, if everything worked out the way Skull wanted it to, from our point of view currently in the story, eventually Lucy would age out of being able to talk to him.
Yeah, unless he killed her. And then they could be together forever.
Yeah, that's fair, because he does always want to be let out of the jar. Anyways, so they go back to looking around, and there's a lots of noise. And Lucy has that moment where she's like, I understood why Penelope Fitz had wanted me there. Not Lockwood. Penelope.
Oh.
Anyway, so the noises start to increase, so she tries talking to Skull about it again, and he is, as we said, very petulant. Like, you care a bean what I think. Great line, Skull. Love it. Dear old Skull, I do care. I'm asking you as a she can't say it. Skull's like, I detect hesitation. As a friend? She's like, well, no, obviously not. A respected colleague then? No.
You know what Skull is to her is a valuable asset.
Nice.
So again, I'm like looking at this symbolically and that he's part of her, blah, 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 blah. Can she like herself directly? Is she able to do that? Is this part of what she wants Lockwood for? Because she can mediate her worthiness and her lovableness through someone else. I mean, like if Lockwood loves me, then I'm lovable. But can she love herself? Can she be friends with herself?
Any teenager unequivocally like themselves?
No, I don't think
even
so.
The ones who are like super confident and blah, blah, blah. I feel like maybe they just need, like you said, they need to feel that love from other people in order to feel it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, they just happen to be popular. So it's like working out. Yeah.
I would say no, but not through any fault of Lucy. Like, that's just the teenage experience.
Is there any symbolism here of her not being able to say Skull is my friend? Because then that would mean that she would have to befriend some part of herself that she's just like...
her inner darkness.
Yeah. She's like, no, I can't do that. I can't accept myself.
Very earthsy of her.
Oh, yeah. No Ged. No.
Yeah.
I do like a little bit earlier in this where there's a real good show, don't tell thing where she gets the jar fully out of her rucksack and puts it on the counter, and the face appears, and then it says, "It wore a haughty expression as I watched it slowly but steadily rotated away from me." He doesn't even need to say anything. You know exactly what that means.
Yeah.
They're not in a good place.
But after Skull stops answering her is when the ghost gets out the human stew.
Yeah.
Because I guess this all happened in the kitchen, which maybe we should have said anyways. So Skull stops answering her, and then she hears the rattling around on the stove, and she kind of slowly turns to look.
Oh, it even says here, it says, "It was dark, no gas flames had been lit. Nevertheless, there was something moving on top of it now." So Stroud knows gas stoves are creepier. He knows.
They're way creepier than electric.
Yeah.
And induction, the least creepy. Really, sometimes it's like, is there even a stove there with the induction ones?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so it gets out a saucepan. Like, she can't see a ghost. She just, like, the saucepan starts moving. That's very poltergeist.
That's what I was thinking too. Like classic 1980s movie, like a pan on a stove just rattling and steam coming out of the corners.
But then I'm unsure if any of it happened, like, right then for Lucy, or if it's just, like, a memory of the ghost that she's seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe nothing is actually moving. She's just seeing it, and then when she snaps out of it, or I think Lockwood snaps her out of it, then it all just goes back to normal. Like, the saucepan was never there.
Right. So she's on the other side of the kitchen, and as she sees this, she's kind of slowly walking across the kitchen to the stove. And then when she's almost to the stove, Lockwood breaks in and he's like, "Lucy!" And then she like snaps out of it.
Yeah.
Or what's probably happening is that what always happens with Lucy, the ghost is connecting with her in a deep way, and she's connecting with it and drawing it out.
Yeah.
So this is probably what Penelope Fitz wanted to happen in terms of a test. She probably doesn't expect them to actually find the source, I would think. Kipps would report back and be like, "I don't know, nobody else sensed anything, but she was freaking out. You know, like she saw this and that and the other thing, and who knows."
I do like the bit where Lockwood is like, it had snared you, it was drawing you in. And this is like, "I wasn't snared at all, I just wanted to see." And then she kind of stops and he's like, "Exactly. Like, what are you doing?" It's like, right.
It just smelled really good, and I wanted to see.
I wanted some of the human stew. But that just is like, "That's why I'm here, Lockwood. I sense things. I draw them out. You have to trust me. That's all." And
this is their whole problem, right?
Yeah. And he says, "Of course I trust you, but it still concerns me." And she says, "Well, it needn't. I can cope with all that, as you should know, if you actually want me here." And then, of course, she brings up Penelope Fitz, so I guess she does confront Lockwood with it here. Oh, but then they're immediately interrupted.
Yeah. They almost have a conversation, but it's a close call because something else happens and they have to go to the basement.
Because there was like a crash or something.
Yeah, so George is down there. He's like, "Come quick, come down, everybody." And when they get down there, there's nothing to see, but he's like, "Oh, there was, bones and meat and stuff on the floor, and it was all here."
The way that it's described, I picture like walking down the stairs into like a pool of bones and discarded meat.
Yuck.
Like, that's what enters my head. Like, he turned his basement into a human pool.
Yuck.
And again, we only know that he ate one guy. So, probably not the case.
Again, it's like the real estate agent, and it'll be like, "And here in the basement, we have the human pool. Filtration's really easy. Just add
the bone
fresh
pit.
Parts." Yeah, the bone pit.
Just make sure to keep up with your shock and your...
So then once they're down there, then they hear a scream in a different part of the house.
Oh, yeah, Holly.
Yeah.
I love this, especially since the basement I pictured so bad in my head, even though like that's not quite how George describes it. And she's just like, "There was a roast."
Yeah.
Plates, cutlery, like terrifying.
I like her detail of like there was a nicely folded napkin and that was the worst thing of all. Which is like such a good detail for her because it was like, oh, the ghost was good and proper and it was still evil. No, like,
but also just the fact that he took the time to make himself a fancy place setting for his roast.
Well, it was like a special occasion, like get out the good china. I have the neighbor over for dinner.
Gotta impress him.
But all that to say, it's like getting more intense, obviously. Like other people are hearing things and seeing things.
And then while they're talking about it, Lucy is still hearing the sounds of him eating.
Ugh.
And I like that after her sort of slow reveal of that, which is super creepy the way that she sort of says it, Lockwood's like, you know what, let's get out of here for a minute. They all exit and then they're like, oh shit, Kipps. We just left him.
Kipps?
Love it.
Because they hear another scream. All of them hear it this time.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, that one's real. That's not a supernatural scream because just Lucy would have heard it. And they're like, wait, but we're all here. And it's like, oh no, there's still Kipps. So they rush back in to save Kipps, who is obviously being murdered.
But he's fine. He looks bored in the circle.
He's bored at the top of the stairs.
I wrote down, ignorance is bliss. Huh? What do you idiots want now? Love it. And that's the end of chapter 9. And in chapter 10, George pulls out the hidden source, Lockwood distracts the ghost, and Holly seals it. Look, Lucy, I like just reading that. It would seem like Lucy did nothing.
Yep.
This is what I'm saying about this, the way that Stroud wrote this. I don't see why he wouldn't have given Lucy more.
She's there to assist. So I guess that's what happened. Lockwood and co solve the case. Yeah.
Anyways,
so the
chapter
art here,
is a hand on some glass.
Mm-hmm. Can even see the lifelines in the hand. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. I'd meant to come back and fill in some more information, but I don't remember getting any more information about whose hand this is.
Oh, I thought because the way that they describe the kitchen, it has windows inside the place.
Yeah.
So I just assumed that when they were all inside the kitchen and it was trying to get in, that this was like...
I thought they just saw the silhouette. Well, whatever.
Maybe.
We'll get there. Anyway, so they're out on the front porch. This time Kipps is with them. Kind of regrouping. They have some tea and snacks, as they do. Lucy expresses how much she likes the fun places Lockwood takes her.
Yeah. There's nothing better to Lockwood than working at night. Like, this really is the best thing in his mind.
Yeah, and so Lucy talks with them about how like she's getting too much from the ghost, but also like nothing. Like they keep seeing things and hearing things, but nobody has seen the ghost. It's just echoes and memories and things. And
it keeps being in different rooms too, right? Like it's in the basement, it's in the living room, it's in the kitchen, it's all over.
And so this is where Lockwood puts forth that the ghost has kind of become the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then Holly has that great bit where she's like, is the whole house the source then? Should we just burn it down? Which again, why didn't Fitz just do that? A control, like just knock the house, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then she's like, I'm not really suggesting that. And George is like, we've set fire to houses before. And Kipps is like, deliberate arson is not likely to impress Fitz or Barnes.
But that's that thinking outside the manual kind of thing that George does, right?
Yep. And George wasn't at the first house that they burned down, so maybe he feels left out.
He's like, come on, guys. That's funny.
And Lucy doesn't say anything because, as we know, she has reformed.
Yeah, she's not a pyro anymore.
Quill points out that there will be a more localized source that they can seal. I assume he just points that out because Stroud needs them to come up with a plan, and not because Quill would know that for any reason.
I think that the whole concept here is a little bit of conceptual foreshadowing, though, for the creeping shadow itself that we get later in the book, because it's able to roam an area that should be impossible. Usually the way that you hunt the ghosts in the haunted houses that we've seen every other time, all the way, from the first chapter of the first book, is like it retreats to its source in a certain part of the house. But this thing is like pinballing all over the place, and easily goes everywhere. And part of that's the compact size of the house, coupled with the large size of the ghost, I guess.
Yeah.
But this gives you like an idea of a concept of a ghost that can freely roam all over the place, so that when we see it later, I don't think we're like, oh, this breaks the world in a way that like, I don't understand. Even though they still kind of have that reaction, you've been prepped for it a little bit, if that makes sense with this concept.
But that doesn't turn out to be
a ghost. Yeah. That's fine. I'm not saying that it's the same. I'm just saying that like you would know something's wrong right away if you're like, this thing can go anywhere. Like, they would never seen a ghost like that. Something else must be happening. I think this gives you a little bit of cover to be like, well, maybe it is a ghost, because that Solomon Guppy guy could go anywhere in his house. So who knows, if that makes any sense.
I get what you're saying. I don't know that I necessarily agree.
So it is a little bit of a reach on my part, but like I'm very like stretchy.
You're very good at the reach.
Yeah.
Because of the realization that the house and the ghost are very much linked, they're like, well, let's draw them out. Let's start destroying the house. Not with fire, but with crowbars.
Yeah, because this is the classic, like detective fiction thing where Kipps is like, like unless you can draw the ghost out and persuade it to reveal itself, which is hardly likely. And then Lockwood is like, you're a genius.
And Kipps is okay with crowbars in a way that he was not okay with fire. Right. Makes total sense. Anyway, so Kipps and Lockwood start destroying the kitchen, because they do also decide that the kitchen is where the most ghost activity has been. And also, just to be clear, George sets up his pews in the kitchen when they're there. And so then while Lockwood and Kipps are destroying things, which I love the detail that like Kipps has to stop and take some water and stuff, because I have done a rage room before, and destroying things is hard work. Oh my God. We got so sweaty. It was so much fun. Highly recommend if you want to destroy some stuff. But we got so sweaty. It was a lot of work. Crowbars, and I don't know, we had like a metal pipe that we were just destroying. It was heavy, and you're swinging it over and over again. Do recommend. Throwing plates at the wall was a lot of fun too.
They definitely rage out here, and
yes, so they rage, and then Lucy takes the opportunity to talk to Skull again and be like, "Could you actually please just help us?" And Skull does say they're on the right track, but also that the ghost is kind of asleep,
or it was asleep this whole time,
and now they've woken him.
Woke it up.
But before that, he sort of implies that everything that they've seen has been like his dreams.
Right.
Or his dreaming memories of when he was eating his neighbor.
Yeah, he's just having a good time. He's like in a good place, remembering things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. And then yeah, once they hit something in particular with the crowbar, he says, "Congratulations, you've woken him," and he's not happy. And then far off in the house, she hears that clicking noise again.
And she knows what it is. All of a sudden, it's teeth tapping together over and over, which is so creepy. It's really, really good.
I don't know if the mic picked it up, but I tried.
Oh, it's like an intimate weapon. I don't know. It's like, it's of his body. It's so creepy.
And she also just suddenly knows that he used to observe the neighborhood, like staring out a window, clicking his teeth as if imagining eating everyone who walked by. That's fun.
Yeah.
Certainly makes me want to go for a walk around my neighborhood.
It reminds me of that Kids in the Hall character who squishes people's heads from far away, but he's like eating them instead. But she tells everybody, she's like, "We've got company," and everybody kind of freezes, and then they get ready.
But I think Lockwood sort of keeps destroying because he's like, he wants the ghost to get there faster. Right. And then George sort of sidles up to Lucy and is like, "What's his plan to do when it arrives?" And Lucy just says, "I have no idea." But then they hear footsteps, and this is where George is like, "Can I share something personal with you?" Lucy's like, "Yes." And George says, "If you'd rather I didn't, you being a free agent and all, you only have to say." It's like, "It's still neat. Just spell it out." He's like, "Okay, I really don't want to see this one." I love it. This reveal that George is way more freaked out than he was letting on.
He's just, can we just leave now? Actually,
Yeah.
like, there's clearly no plan. We're just antagonizing this thing. He's creepy. I don't like it. I don't want to get eaten by a ghost.
And Lucy agrees with George, and then eventually they all notice that the apparition is in the hall, basically.
Yeah, like his stomach is rubbing against the wall the way that it used to, and it's coming down to eat them.
And George is like, what do we do? And Lockwood's like, exactly what we're already doing. Bring him to us and we wipe him out. I actually kind of like the way that Lockwood is thinking here, because you shouldn't be letting your emotions get the best of you in a haunted house. We're told that over and over again. Just treat it like a normal ghost.
It'd be nice if they had any inkling of where the source is while they're doing this. Like,
yes, that is what happens next, exactly. Lucy appeals to the skull again.
She is like, I won't break your jar. It was like earlier she threatened him, like, I'll break your jar with a crowbar and smash your skull to bits. And she's like, I'm sorry I said that. And he's like, oh, first it's threats, then it's sweet words. You have no dignity, do you? And she's like, no, just tell me where it is.
And then he does say that considering how the ghost is reacting, they're probably on the right course. Which, more to your point, I do feel like Lucy could have figured it out on her own. If she had just taken a moment to think about it.
This is like, earlier in the book where the Emma Marchment ghost was like, had a bad reaction once she located where the skull was and was like, now I'm going to get you. This ghost is doing the same thing. It's like they're closing in on the source and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And both of those sources are hidden. And again, I think that this is like a soft foreshadowing of the creeping shadow, where there's like hiddenness is a very important aspect for solving the later mystery around what the creeping shadow is and how it operates and everything. Like, you have to kind of think of things outside of the Fitz manual way of doing them, because like it's a secret.
I still think you're reaching.
Shh, no, it's perfectly subtly set up. It's so good. Okay.
Well, anyways, they eventually knock off a certain part of the counter, I guess, that they were destroying, to see that they can see that there's something sort of hidden away in a hole behind a pipe.
Yeah, I always thought this was like under the sink or something.
Yeah, something, I don't know. Anyways, it's there. Lockwood decides that George will be the best to get at it. And meanwhile, Lockwood is going to go out and face the ghost in order to buy them some time. No one likes that, but he's gonna, Lockwood seems to like this idea, but nobody else likes it. And then all of a sudden, the ding, ding, ding goes off.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Hey, there's a ghost.
Yeah. Right on the other side of the wall. What are you doing?
It's about to eat you, literally.
And it scares the crap out of everyone. And then they're like, oh, it rings now? That thing is so useless, George. George is like, don't blame me. Blame the Rotwell Institute. They're selling junk.
So this is like more of the... We're going to get this for the whole book.
Yeah, and then George keeps asking Lucy if she has any plumbing tools. Like, so
yeah,
great.
Do you have this kind of wrench? Do you have
a tap wrench? Do you have a spanner? It's so great. He's like, no, I'm an agent, not a plumber.
Yeah, this is good stuff where there's like a frantic battle, and then in the background there's like, you
got a wrench?
It's the it's the Star Wars thing where Han Solo is trying to fix the Falcon and they're in the middle of an asteroid field.
Yeah.
There's a really evocative passage here that I thought was really good writing, where it says, the door was opening, a vast black shadow spilled through it like a lolling tongue. Ooh. And then that's where Lockwood like throws the salt bomb and goes in there. Yeah. Slips through the door and slams it shut behind him. And I was like, oh man, it's because it is like the house is him, like his mouth was opening and he's the tongue. It's like, ugh.
And Lucy keeps hearing a keening scream over and over.
But eventually George is able to be like, there's a jar in here and I gotta turn it this way and that way. And I got it out and somebody give me a seal.
And Holly drops a net over it.
Yep. And then that's it.
Turns out that Lockwood had small injuries. There's some blood, but Holly fusses around him, so it's fine. And then once they're all packed up, Lucy and Lockwood have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, he's really happy. He's like, I think we even impressed Kipps.
Yeah.
So like, whatever.
And then he's like, do you know what was in what the source was? Did you see it? And then George told me, lots of human teeth. A special collection of them. Must have been dear to Guppy's heart.
Yeah. Yeah, when it says lots of them, so then I'm like, well, maybe there's more people then.
Maybe he did eat more than one person. They just don't know who those other people are. Isn't that great? And then Lockwood has this bit where he says, it was good to team up with you again. And then he pauses and says, actually, Lucy? And she's like, yes. And he says, I was wondering something. And she says, yes. And then he just says, do you have any of that chocolate left? I saw you'd started a bar earlier. She gives him the chocolate. He eats all of it. And he sort of just says, you're always good for that because George just eats his and Holly never has any.
This is like he chickened out, right? That's what we're supposed to believe here?
Okay, so here's the thing. I absolutely do think that he wanted to be like, we did well together. You should come back. Like, that was the whole point of this job together from Lockwood's point of view, was showing Lucy that they can still work together well, and that he can trust her, and that he wants her to come back. But I don't think he chickened out. I think he realized she would say no.
It seems like chickening out.
But like, me. I don't know. Like, I like to think, and it's one or the other, I guess. Either he chickened out, but also if you realize she's going to say no, then asking can only make it worse.
I guess, yeah.
Right? Then, like, if he wanted to ask her again, he'd have to wait even longer.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think you're right. I think there's a way of playing this in your head where it's like, actually, Lucy, and he like leans close to her face and their faces are almost touching and she's like, yes. And he's like, I was wondering, you know what I mean? Like they're getting closer and closer. And then he's like, do you have chocolate? I'm a little peckish.
I don't think that.
No, but there's a way of thinking about it that way. I don't think that he's saying that at all. I guess you could.
I think if Lockwood were physically getting closer to her, she would have mentioned, like the narration would have mentioned.
Yeah.
I think he was nonchalantly, I just stumbled over that word so badly.
In a nonchalant way.
Yeah, in a very chalant way, actually. Was trying to ask her to come back, but either chickened out or realized that there was no point in asking.
No, I think you're right. That he felt like his moment was wrong.
Yeah.
And and that was his intention. There is a feeling, an unspoken feeling here from Lucy of like, ask me. You like, this is your moment. And it just goes in a different direction. I don't think that she would have said yes to come.
No,
back.
I don't think she would have said yes either.
But she wanted to hear it, I think.
Yeah, the narration doesn't tell us what Lucy wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. But then she does have this moment where she tries to ask him what the ghost was like. And he's just like, Lucy, you really don't want to know.
Yeah.
And I'm like excited for the night terrors Lockwood's going to have that night.
Yeah. And then they like split up at this point where they have so much stuff and are going to different places that they have to take different cabs.
Yeah, so it leaves George and Lucy alone at the property waiting for two cabs, one to take him to Portland Row and one to take her back to Tooting, which is sad in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But then I love that Lucy starts asking him about the mummified heads because it brings back that part of the plot, because she's just like, how common are they? And he just...
and he would know.
Yeah, George being George, the question didn't faze him. And he's just like, as psychic artifacts, rare. Has to be the right conditions for mummification, and blah, blah, blah. And then he says, why? And she's like, I just heard of two recently, and I was wondering how likely it was, that's all. And then they get into talking about Lockwood and how reckless he's been, and that George kind of blames Lucy because he's gotten way worse since she left, which has got to be great for Lucy.
This is part of the side effect of not telling them the whole truth, right? Like, this hurts a lot more because this is her underlying reason for leaving is to keep Lockwood safe. And it turns out that he's being less safe.
Yeah, she says, when did it start? When did he get worse? And George just shrugs and says, after you left. And she says, and you think, what do you think that, or why do you think that is? And
Oh, man.
George is like, why do you
why
think
would,
that is?
Yeah, why would that be? Why would he care if I left? I don't
Yeah.
understand. Like, nobody cares about me or likes me. And George is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And then Lucy's just like, well, it's got nothing to do with me. And George is like, oh, of course not. Your leaving the company had no effect on any of us. Why, a day after you left, we'd forgotten your name. And then she's like, okay, you don't need to be like that. And he's like, how do you want me to be?
Poor George. His pain is so raw here. He's so hurt and upset. Because George here specifically says, like, he's more reckless than ever. And I feel like they were really setting up that line in the show. You know, to be like just reckless enough. And then when she leaves, it's going to get, too reckless for him.
And then George is like, well, you came right back when Lockwood asked you. And she's like, well, would you rather I hadn't? And he's like, well, it's none of my business. You cool freelancers walk your own path. He's so hurt. She's like, nah. And then they're just like having the most... like, how dare you go off to college and leave me with the parents fight?
That's true. That is what this is. Yeah. Do you think that he believes that it's about money for her at all? That there's like a secret motivation and that makes him mad? Or is he just using that as a weapon?
I think
because he keeps bringing it up.
I don't think he's mad at Lucy about the money. If anything, that's like something he's using against Lockwood. Right? Yeah, like, I don't think he thinks she wants more money. I'm pretty sure he knows her well enough to know that that's never been a big motivator for her.
It's just it just seems like a weapon to me. Something that's easy for him to be like, well, you just care about money, and knowing that that's not really true.
Yeah.
I feel bad for George through this whole thing. It's a painful passage.
I do too. And again, I just think it's the best choices that Stroud could have made, writing-wise. Because if you'd had to wait for the book at all, you probably thought Lockwood was going to be the angry one.
Yeah.
And George was going to be the understanding one, especially with the way things were in book 3. So I think it was just a really good choice to make it the other way around.
Mm-hmm. But it makes sense to me emotionally. It feels
absolutely.
authentic.
Yeah. 100%.
But
especially
I think you're right about that.
Since I do think all three of them, Lockwood, Holly, and George, know that Lucy isn't telling them the whole truth.
I think that's a part of the pain here for George, is that there is something to Lucy's motivations that is just mysterious and incomprehensible. Mm-hmm. And they're like, why you, and then you like never came back or reached out, and like, we're just supposed to be fine. And then you get upset with us for being hurt and changing. Like, what's wrong with you? The whole thing ends in a little bit of a joke, which I appreciate. So the feelings aren't too bad going into the next part, where it's like, for heaven's sakes, you're just being childish. And he's like, am not R2. So
yeah,
I like that.
They just like regressed into children.
Yeah. And they are kids. So like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's good that happens, because that's an important part of the story. They are literally growing up. It's fine to be messed up in this way. It's normal.
And that is the end of the chapter and the end of part 2.
So next time we'll definitely read all 17 chapters of Lost and Found.
There's 17?
No, it goes up to 17. So I think that's why that joke just happened. It's long though. There's 7 chapters.
Oh, so we're not going to do it. So it's probably going to be 3 goes.
Probably.
Did you have a best joke?
There are more jokes in this part than there was in the previous one.
I think I like Real Estate Agent George.
That's very funny.
Creepy Real Estate Agent George. When he starts correcting people on what body parts it is.
No, it's the eyeballs here. Yeah. I do like the stuff with Skull, like turning around and, and all that, and being like, oh, are we talking again? is this? Oh, I didn't realize. I don't know if that's a single joke. It's just like the running gag through the whole thing.
Yeah, so the same thing with George. Yeah.
Yeah.
There wasn't much punk rock.
Punk rock, I guess, like maybe throwing a bomb at a ghost and bursting out of the door to keep everyone safe is pretty. But I don't know. It's also death wishy, suicidal behavior from Lockwood.
This is very like the least punk rock of the books so far.
Yeah. I mean, I like that Kipps is like, we got to follow the rules, guys. When bad things happen, we should just leave. That's the rules. And then Lockwood's like, let's go fuck up the kitchen. And Kipps is like, cool, give me a crowbar. So like, that's a little bit punk rock for him to
I do
go
enjoy
against the rules.
I do enjoy that Kipps is like, well, these are the rules, but I don't care.
Management's being really pissy to me, so whatever.
Yeah, actually, I do really like that now that we've put it in that way.
This whole book is the redemption of Kipps. That's what the book's really about.
Well, if you have any insights onto why this job happened at all, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Lockwood Podcast. And if you want, you can follow me on Instagram, where I occasionally post about the books that I read, at Inferior Kate Reads.
You can send emails to contact@hollowedgroundmedia, or you can go to our website at hollowedgroundmedia.com and scroll down to the contact form and fill that out.
And remember, human stew is best cooked on a gas stove. Human
Delicious.
stew.